This is the pop-up talk, high-speed clients, the missing link in big data performance. My name is Jared Johnson. I'm a technology evangelist for CData Software, which is a leading provider in data connectivity solutions. In this session, we're going to talk about efficient client optimizations and how they can fuel successful data ops and analytics outcomes. All right, recently, there has been an explosion in the amount of data in the world. So studies are showing that data is doubling every 3 years, which is just crazy. With all of that explosion in data, people need places to put the data. So there's been an 8 to 10% annual growth in data warehousing, and that growth is continued or projected to continue until the year 2025. And that's not just on-prem data warehousing, but that's cloud data warehousing and hybrid data warehousing. With all of this data consolidated, it's really nice. You're building a gold mine of your data. So you no longer have to go out to your SaaS applications. You no longer have to go out to cloud databases. You're no longer going into private databases and other data systems. All of that data is consolidated, which lets you drill into that data gold mine. However, there's a problem. Even though data warehouses are optimized for performance, for querying performance, the analytics tools, if they exist at all in those data warehousing applications, may not offer all of the functionality that you need. So the solution that many people are turning to, many businesses are turning to, is they're looking to external applications for their analytics, external applications for reporting, for BI, for machine learning, for artificial intelligence, and more. The problem you run into there is that you're bound to the performance constraints of either the application or the connectivity between that application and your data warehouse. This is where it becomes important to build client connectivity that keeps up. So modern storage solutions are elastic. Modern storage solutions are scalable. So you're getting all of the data performance that you want out of your data warehouses, but you need to make sure that your client applications are optimized to take advantage of all of that. So there are certain things that your client applications need to use well in order to leverage the performance that's built into your data warehousing. So some of those constraints, some of those pipelines that can be small might be CPU management. How is the client application using heap or memory? Is the client application leveraging networking resources properly? And with the advent of cloud and hybrid data warehousing, you have scalability. So you're able to allocate resources for reading. Is the client application using those allocated resources properly? So let's take a look. Let's take a chance to identify what some of these bottlenecks in your client applications may look like. So in this case, we did some benchmarking. We wrote some Java apps and some C# apps that leverage JDBC and ODBC drivers to query data. We're querying millions of rows of data. And then we used either built-in or operating system-based monitoring applications to look at how the client-side resources were being used. So we'll take a look at this first example. It's using the native Azure Cosmos DB connectivity. We built a basic C++ application using their ODBC driver. And as you can see, we're hitting the bottleneck of synchronous data processing. So the little yellow line, the application is processing the data, and then it's reading data, and then processing data, and then reading data, which seems a little less than ideal, right? So that's one bottleneck. Another bottleneck that you may run into is low CPU utilization and inconsistent heap usage or inconsistent memory usage. So in this example, well, we built a Java application to read data from Elasticsearch. Again, looking at millions of rows of data. We monitored the performance of that application. As you can see, this application, using the Elasticsearch JDBC driver, was not optimized for CPU usage. So we're using less than 5% of the CPU over the course of the read. And it looks like we do pretty good in the heap usage. So we've got all this allocated. It's using most of it. But over the course of the query, it uses less and less of the heap. So you've got all this memory available, but the driver, the connector, is not using that memory to read as much data, to handle as much data as possible. And then in the last example, we're looking at a third-party driver connector for Amazon DynamoDB. In this case, we have the built-in monitoring in the DynamoDB ecosystem. As you can see, we've got allocated resources, but the competitor driver, well, we got this much and we're using, I don't know, what is that, like an eighth, maybe? So you're paying money for this and your client is only using this much. So, right, it seems like you're wasting a lot of money there. So now that we've gotten the bad and the ugly out of the way, let's take a look at the good. So these are all examples of the same applications being run, but using CData software connectors to manage the connection, to handle the querying. So same application was run, pulling the same amount of data from Azure Cosmos DB. Instead of synchronous data processing, we have asynchronous data processing. So constant CPU usage, constant network usage. So reading data and processing it simultaneously. As more data comes in, it's still being processed, so the process continues. The next example, same Java application, reading data from Elasticsearch, and here we can see we're using a significantly higher amount of the CPU to process data, and we're making the most of that allocated heap. So the Java heap that's been allocated for the Java application, we're using a consistent amount of that. So again, demonstrating that we've optimized that connectivity, so making the most of the high performance data warehousing that you have available. And the last example that we're looking at is the same application that was being run before with DynamoDB. In this case, it's the CData connector. So we have the allocated resources. So the CData connector used a significantly larger portion of the allocated resources, the read units that we were paying for, which means that you're able to read more data more quickly. So if I had wanted to, I could have just turned off that allocation once the read process was done. So you pull the data faster, you're able to save money by not having to allocate a high number of read units for nearly as long. So what's the crux? The crux of the matter is that these optimized client connections, optimized clients are going to help fuel those data ops and fuel those analytics outcomes. So when client-side connectivity keeps up with server-side performance, you're going to see benefits like faster analytics outcomes. So if you're building dashboards, you'll get more responsive dashboards. If your client connector is able to process data quickly, every time you refresh that dashboard, you're going to see new information pop up. So you can build something that looks more like a real-time dashboard. You're also looking at faster data loading. So if you're doing machine learning, if you're doing artificial intelligence on your data, you're able to load that data faster than you were before. You can save money on those cloud processing costs. So like I showed with the DynamoDB, if you're paying money for the allocated resources and your client connection is using the majority of those resources, then you don't have to allocate those resources for as long. And then the one thing that we weren't able to demonstrate in the charts is you get this ad hoc querying. So because the client connector can read data faster, you can explore your data more effectively. You're able to start looking at different dimensions and measures as you build your charts and your graphs and explore the data, see what it looks like, and figure out what is meaningful about the data. So when does performance matter? Always. And that's when you want that optimized client connectivity. CData connectors are able to consistently outperform the competitors, typically twice as fast. So cutting your processing time in half. So we have a series of comparative benchmarks for our big data connectors. You can see those at cdata.com/tech/performance. And we don't only optimize connectivity to big data sources, we also optimize connectivity to SaaS applications. So your CRMs, your ERPs, your accounting software, payroll software, and things like that. If you have further questions, I'm happy to answer them. We also have a booth 1437, so just down the row here. So again, thank you. You guys have a wonderful afternoon.